Welcome to V is for Victory, a podcast about how small businesses overcome big battles. I'm your host, Jill Miller of Vera Creative, a boutique marketing firm in the Chicagoland area where I'm also a part-time professor of an advertising course. Join me as I talk with entrepreneurs about the challenges they faced as well as their strategies for success. Hey everybody, welcome. Today I'm here with Tricia Nelson. She is an emotional eating expert and founder of HealYourHunger.com. Thanks for being with us today, Tricia.
Oh, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, so talk to me a little bit about where your story begins. Was emotional eating something that came up for you in your own life, or was it something you observed in the lives of others? Like, how and where does your story begin?
Oh, totally personal. I was an emotional eater early on in my life. I mean, food is a big obsession for me. I love to eat. I love to cook. I love to, serve food to other people. And it was just everything I thought about, and which wouldn't have been terrible, except that I gain weight really easily. So that was the part that was really bad, is that I grew up fat basically, and I hated being fat. I had a roll on my tummy that would scrunch up in my hands, and imagine cutting it off like you've cut fat off the side of a steak, or getting some disease where I'd automatically lose weight without having a diet. Or I even considered joining the army, where I'd be forced to go through boot camp and exercise, because I hated exercise. So I was like, pretty tortured. So, and then I tried lots of different things to try to solve my weight issue, and nothing I tried worked. So I was really desperate. I know the pain of, not fitting into my jeans, having 5 different sizes of jeans in my closet because I never knew what size I was going to be. And then, so what happened for me after trying many different diets is that I felt really hopeless, and I met somebody who was able to show me how to heal. And so that changed everything. And I was able to lose the 50 extra pounds and live in a thin body. And because I found a solution, I started working with my mentor to help others. And that was many years ago. And it wasn't until about 5 years ago that I started my own business doing this work of showing people how to heal from emotional eating. So because I can't diet, I had to go deeper and really address the underlying causes of my eating issues. So everything I do, I wrote a best-selling book, and I created a podcast, and I created a course online, and I coach online to women all around the world. So that's kind of how everything happened, but totally driven by my own personal story, and also just knowing the pain of this condition I suffer from, and how many other people are still suffering, and just wanting to help them.
Wow, there's so much in there. First, I can totally relate, because I feel like, I've tried the Whole30 diet, didn't really work at all for me, where it's, I heard everybody say like, oh, I lost X amount of weight, or, oh, I feel so great, or, oh, I have so much more energy. And right now I'm trying TRS with heavy metal detox. And there's Facebook groups of like 30,000 people and all these testimonials of how it's just cured them. And I'm sitting here 3 months into my heavy metal detox, and I feel zero difference.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, how does this work for everybody on the planet but me? And it's very isolating. And so that was interesting. As you were talking a little bit about your personal story, I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, I can really relate to this. And I wonder how many of my listeners can relate as well. Talk to me a little bit, because I think almost every person I've interviewed for my podcast, every entrepreneur has had a mentor. How did you get connected to your mentor?
Well, I mean, my mentor was obviously the one who helped me more than anybody. And I mean, how did I get connected? I knew some women who were getting help from him, and I saw profound changes in their lives. And so I literally witnessed the work that he does in other people's story. And that's what convinced me. And he sort of specialized in helping people who just couldn't get it anywhere else. So that's what happened, is I saw it in other people, and I called him up and said, hey, can you help me? And that's kind of what happened.
And so I feel like there's a level of consciousness that has to be reached too, when people realize I can't slap a Band-Aid on this any longer. I can't pop a pill. There is an underlying issue. There's a root cause, and I need to address that versus all these temptations that just mask symptoms. What are your thoughts on all the marketing, all the products, all the, just all the noise in that space of, whether it's a pharmaceutical or even a natural product that, like you said, like just doesn't address the underlying issues?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's there's a lot of noise out there for sure. And I mean, if you do a search on Amazon right now for diet books, you'll get over 60,000 results. So yeah, and it's dizzying for people. And the statistics show, I mean, there are dozens of studies that show that at least 95% of all diets fail. So that's what we're looking at, is a ridiculously, abysmal success rate. And yet people are still going at it, spending, I mean, billions of dollars on weight loss. So the people who are attracted to my message, I think have they been around the block so many times, and they're frustrated. I mean, like me, they feel like, gosh, there's got to be a better way. This yo-yoing syndrome doesn't work. And so what I have to share with people is a deeper message. It's a soulful message. It's one that really does go deeper and speaks to people's heart. I mean, it's so sexy to think, oh, there's a new diet out there. There's a new plan. There's a new strategy, a new, the ketones, or the, intermittent fasting, or the keto, whatever, this, that, and the other. And that's all sexy, but at the end of the day, it's all dealing with this symptom and not the problem. Like the symptom of overweight. Overweight is a symptom of overeating, and overeating is a symptom of what's eating me. So for me, we got to start talking about what's eating me. What's going on? Why am I driven to go into the kitchen 5 times a day? What's really going on? And so that deeper conversation, even though it's not as sexy and it's kind of scary. I mean, we spend our lives avoiding our feelings, avoiding looking within. That's why we eat. So to ask somebody to start doing that, they have to be ready for that conversation. So I don't work with everybody who wants to lose weight. I work with people who want to lose weight, but understand that they have to go deeper. And that's where I live. That's the emotional eating piece. Everybody knows most people aren't stupid. They know that salads are better than pizza, but they keep eating pizza. So what I do is I help people understand why they keep eating pizza and how to stop craving pizza.
That's so fascinating. So I have a personal question to ask you for my own. So I have a toddler. She just turned 3. What do you think we do as parents that might be encouraging emotional eating in our children, like in ways that we don't even realize it?
Yeah. Oh gosh, that is tricky, isn't it? So, I don't have kids, but my sisters have kids, and they both have eating. They've had disorder eating. All 3 of us have. And I would just say the number one thing you can do is address your own stuff and own issues around food, so that you don't model, disordered behavior. And that's obviously easier said than done. But a lot of times people, they don't realize how sensitive kids are and how much they pick up on our own issues and our own, problems that we have, or neuroses that we have, which is unfortunate. We'd like to hide it. Right. So, so I think just, probably the best thing a parent can do is address their own issues with food, and also be really mindful of putting yourself first. Literally as a parent, it's so easy to get stressed out. It's so easy to put your kids first. But the problem with that is it'll come back to bite you, because if, like the classic scenario of putting your oxygen mask on first on an airplane, if you don't take care of yourself, you won't have the resources from which to care for other people. And you'll be eating like that. The reason why we eat is because we're not good at self-care. And so we're running around doing for other people. And if we don't stop and take time for ourselves first, then we use food to keep us going. We resort to snacky foods for stamina. And there's, obviously that's gonna cause problems. It's gonna cause weight gain and self-disgust and this conflict around food that kids are gonna pick up on. So the best thing you can do is make sure you meditate, make sure you have time, like mommy time, where you are taking care of yourself and offloading stress, so you're not stress eating.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you're speaking to my heart because I also teach yoga and my listeners know that. So
Beautiful.
self-care and meditation and,
Yeah,
exercise are all
you get
right
it.
up my alley. But yeah, I mean, as a parent, I just worry about everything. And so I try not to reward with food
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want to create that like, oh, I'm going to go reward myself with food every time I do a good job, because I feel like
Mm-hmm.
even in positive ways, you can become like, in a sense, positively emotionally eating, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
Using it as a reward. And I think that can create just as much shame and guilt and all the feels.
Yeah, no,
That
that's
Yeah.
really, really important.
Yeah. So okay, so you had a mentor, they helped you. And at what point then did you decide, you know, entrepreneurship in this particular um I guess, area, I don't know, industry, if we want to say. I mean, I feel like
Mm-hmm.
you're not in the diet industry, you're really in the,
Yeah, health.
yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
psychology.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at what point did you realize, at what point in the journey, like how far were you 100% healed? Are we ever 100% healed before you started helping others?
Yeah, I do consider it a continuum. Like you're never cured. I think with any addictive habit, I subscribe to kind of the Alcoholics Anonymous version of,
Hmm.
that you're in recovery but not recovered.
Hmm.
Because it can come back really quickly if I don't do my self-care, if I don't, stay on top of my emotions, it's easy to fall back. So um for that reason, I consider myself still recovering. And so I will say that when I started my business, I had worked for many years, literally decades, with my mentor and helping other people. We partnered to help other people. So, uh, I had a lot of recovery under my belt, so to speak. But I think actually when I first started my podcast, I was actually going through a bit of a hard time, and I was a little lost because I stopped working with my mentor. So I was like, "Where's my next? What I'm going to do?" So emotionally, I was in a tough place, but I followed a calling. I heard in my heart that I needed to work with emotional eaters specifically. We'd worked with all addictions before, so I knew I needed to work with emotional eaters, and I resisted that for a long time. But finally, I stepped into my shoes and did it. And it helped me personally. Like I came out of my funk, and as I started working on my podcast, so I'd like to say I was all better and then I did it, but actually I was going through a hard time and answering that call. I was probably going through a hard time because I wasn't answering that call.
Hmm.
I wasn't aligned with my heart, with God, that still small voice and God voice inside of me. So once I did that, I got back into my groove. So I think that's an important lesson for people too, is, fear will keep us stuck and keep us holding back. But when we step into what we know is our calling, as scary as it is, amazing things will happen.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think for many of us, we feel like if we aren't perfect, don't have all the answers, don't have it all together, that we don't have the gift or the tools or the capacity to help others. And I think the world misses out on a lot from other
Mm,
people because
absolutely.
because of that self-doubt and that belief pattern.
Yeah.
And I always say, like, I teach yoga for myself. When I get up to start teaching, some of the things that come out of my mouth, I'm like, oh, that was so good. I need to take my own advice. I'm like, I don't
Exactly.
even know where that came from, but it manifested like through me, for
Yeah.
me, not just for the
Yeah.
audience,
100%.
Wow, that's so okay. So that makes a lot more sense. So you worked with your mentor, you were doing all different types of healing with different people, but then your heart was really yearning for emotional eating. And was the podcast and the website were they launched at the same time? And
Yes,
yeah.
virtually the same time. So yeah, I did my podcast and my website. Then I wrote my book, or finished writing my book. Got that up on Amazon, and then after the book came my course. My course that sort of is an extension of the book and goes a lot deeper and supports people, in person, online, but in person. So because the book's not going to likely it's hard for people to heal just from a book. So the
Hmm.
book was a great calling card to let people know about my work, and it's a great lead generator for me. But the course is where people really heal. So I've been offering, my course has been going for 4 years now, 4+ years.
Oh wow.
And it's been amazing, and people have gotten amazing support from the work that I do. So it's just an ongoing process of growing, scaling the business.
Yeah. When you started your podcast, your website, in terms of marketing and growing a business, what were some of your challenges that you faced? And then for me, I always draw back on like, okay, so if I'm in marketing and I'm struggling with something, maybe I pull from one of my principles and practices of yoga and I apply it to my business side of life. You see what I'm saying? Like
Mm-hmm.
I find it really fascinating how life can always just intersect and you can use lessons from seemingly one completely separate area of your life, but really apply it all over. So what were some
Sure.
of the hurdles that you came across when you started a business? And then what was the self-talk and what were the tools that you used to solve those problems that might be similar to how you help your clients?
Oh my gosh, I would say self-doubt's probably the biggest, not knowing what I was doing, but feeling compelled to do it, do something. So, that's always a little tricky. Also getting it up and running. I mean, if you're not making any money, it's depressing, and you don't make money right out of the gate. You have to have a year or so. I mean, I had a year or so of going backwards, and funding my business. And I think maybe 2 years of, I wouldn't say going backwards. I think the second year I was starting to bring in money, but that's slow. So you have to
Mhm.
make sure that you have money in the bank, and you have to make sure, or another business or job, while you get it up and running. It just doesn't just happen. It's really a slow build. So that can be super frustrating. Um, and it takes a lot of perseverance. I mean, there's times where you just want to
Yeah.
quit, and say, screw it, or nobody wants this or whatever. But actually, I will say, when I created my course and people started going through my course and getting benefit from it, that was like a light bulb for me, because I didn't know if what I was doing was going to help people. I knew I had a solution personally and I wanted to share it with other people, but it wasn't until I started hearing people say, oh my God, this is such good content. And oh my God, this is helping me so much. And look at how I've lost weight. And like, they're starting to tell me all these things. And even though that was the point of my doing it, you're still kind of surprised. Like,
Yeah.
really? Like, really? People really get benefit from this stuff? So, the positive feedback is so awesome, because it confirms, what you knew, but you don't really know until somebody actually reflects it back to you. Like, yes,
Yeah.
this is awesome. Yes, it's helping. So there's that. But the ramping up and keeping the faith, I'd say, is probably the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I was just talking to my assistant the other day about how the world is kind of not really set up for small businesses. Like I was just trying to order a couple t-shirts and it's like, you can't do it. You can't just order a
Right.
couple. You have to have literally, several hundred to $1,000 put aside to get a variety of colors and a variety of sizes. And there's minimum quantities when you're talking about promotions and promotional items. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
I just want a couple and I want to sell them and see if I can make some money and start slow. But it's like, that is very challenging. And you can spend a lot of time searching on different sites and trying to find the best prices. And then do I get all the printing done in one spot, or then do I take it to somebody local? And I'm just kind of talking out loud here is something that I went through just this week.
Mm-hmm.
And it dawned on me. It's like, yeah, it's hard to not, it's hard to not go all in, it's hard to just be
Yeah.
a little bit in.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
true.
And especially when you're talking about money. But let's talk about the faith piece. So you're right. It's really hard to have faith in yourself, faith that it's going to work out. Faith. For me, I think there's been a couple pivotal moments in my life where I reflect back and I think I made the wrong decision. And so it's very hard for me now that when big decisions come across my plate, for me to have faith in myself to make the
Mm,
right decision because I've made the wrong decision in my past. So
mm.
talk to me a little bit about the faith piece, where you get your faith, what you do in those moments of fear.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a daily meditator, and I pray and I do a lot of spiritual work. I mean, it's part of how I have healed from emotional eating. So it's what I teach. I teach
Mm-hmm.
people to meditate and pray and do these things to help and write and do things to clear out the obstacles to that channel of inspiration. And so that's really vital for me, is that I do every day, connect with spirit, get grounded, because otherwise I'm up in my head and I am in indecision and confusion. And so the more spiritually grounded I can be, the more inspired I am, and the more the decisions I make work for me, like it just works out.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I'm not putting first things first, putting my myself and my self-care, like I talked about before, if I'm not putting self-care first, then I'm not as in tune. So I'd say that's the first thing, is make sure I do first things first, make sure I take time, no matter how busy I am, because my head will be like, I don't have time to meditate. Like I've got so much to do and I got to make this business work and I got to do this and that, So it's not like I'm like hop, skipping and jumping through meditating, it's like I'm resistant.
Floating on a cloud to your meditation pillow.
No.
Exactly.
Exactly. So I have to, I have to remind myself first things first, put your, get connected to spirit first, and your decisions will be so much more inspired and things will work out. So that's really important to me, is that I always stay spiritually connected so that I can be like this, the things I do are inspired, and so, and it doesn't always work out. I mean, I made one business decision, which was really, expensive. I had paid for a service that I didn't really need and I couldn't get out of it. So that was $7,500 down the tubes, Yeah, super painful. So, but that it happens, and you do spend a lot of money trying to figure things out. Like it is not cheap to start a business. So, and then you do everything yourself at first, and then you're like, oh my God, I need help. So, but I will just say that you live and learn. Everybody spends money as they're figuring it out. You blow money. You buy too much, too many t-shirts, or you buy too much stock of
too
something.
Much overhead.
Yep. You throw stuff out later when you're moving to your next house. You're like, oh, here's boxes of shit I never used, so
all these old postcards, they didn't work.
Exactly. So it's par for the course. Everybody does it. And it's just, you just sort of have to shrug it off and just keep moving forward and not try to get bent out of shape about it.
Yeah, you're so right about that. Take me a little bit through the podcast journey, because I'm fairly new. I consider myself fairly new as a podcaster. I originally started out doing 2 episodes a month, and my podcast was originally called The Batter. And what was the tagline? Oh my gosh, I've already even
The
forgot.
batter. How do you spell that?
Yeah, like BATTER, but like
Okay.
like cupcake batter.
Oh,
I can't.
funny.
Yeah, for some reason ingredients to success and recipes for disaster. That's
Oh,
what it
funny.
was.
Got it.
And I rebranded about a year into the show because I wanted it to resonate with my marketing brand, which is called Vera Creative. So that's where V is for victory, which actually, like, you know, this is a story about being too close to the brand. You can't like, sometimes you're just so close to your own brand and it's so personally, you just cannot be creative about it. And that's where I was so stuck. And so I actually outsourced it to my students one semester for
Oh,
a
smart.
project. I was like, hey, can you guys come up with a better podcast name? And, this is the direction I want to take it in. And they just nailed it. So I was forever grateful for that. But so yeah, I'm still fairly new to podcasting. I started in 2020. During lockdowns. I think that's a lot of people kind of started there and then and there most likely, but it's a huge business. Have you been able, do you have advertisers or sponsors? Do you monetize your podcast? Just kind of take me through that journey.
Sure. I did not monetize it. I've not even attempted to monetize it. It's a great idea if you can. I just haven't focused on that because it doesn't, first of all, I don't spend a lot of money on my podcast. So my virtual assistant edits it for me. I paid to have a bumper on the front and the end of it, my little intro and outro. It's so easy. I can edit my own podcast. I have minimal editing skills, but I have Camtasia and I can put it together. I can edit out the bloopers and stuff like that in case my assistant can't do it. But I know a lot of people spend a lot of money on, you can pay, there's so many services, that serve entrepreneurs that will just like sap you dry. And so I just, I do my podcast myself. I just edit it. I have my assistant edit it. I don't pay some big podcasting service. It could be a lot more professionally sounding. I know that, but I'm not willing to spend the money. That's one place I won't spend the money. I do spend money on social media. I spend money on a good service that I have that I'm happy with, and I've done that for over a year. So you have to pick kind of where you want to, have the outlay. But podcasting, it's so easy to do, or go on Upwork.com and get somebody to do it for you in a faraway land. And just don't pay a lot of money for it as far as what I'm concerned. What's important about the podcast is just doing it. The hardest part of doing a podcast is doing it, recording the podcast and getting it up on Stitcher and iTunes and wherever. So, I love that I've been doing a podcast. I just did one the other day. It was totally, my boyfriend listened to it and he's like, yeah, you could tell you were just sort of shooting from the hip and didn't prepare anything, but it's okay.
Hey, that's how I do every episode.
I know. So it's like, but the people who don't mind that and they like me and they like my message, they overlook a few things. So it's not like an award-winning podcast, but it is for an audience of emotional eaters that are tired of talking about diets, and they know I'm real and they know I'm going to cover, they know I'm totally transparent and I talk about my personal life and, and so that's what they like, they overlook the lack of finish for content. And what I love about my podcast is anytime, and I probably will do this, is I can transcribe this podcast and pull some real nuggets out of there and make a book out of it. I can repurpose a lot of content in my podcast and write another book. So there's just so much at our fingertips now that we can do. Last year during COVID, I finally recorded my book on Audible. I recorded my book and created an Audible book. So that was awesome. So there's no better time to be an entrepreneur because there's so much at our fingertips.
Yeah.
And so much we don't have to pay large amounts of money for. And then some things we do. So you just sort of pick your expenses there.
Yeah, I'm in a couple Facebook groups and I keep trying to encourage people. I'm like, if you're finding yourself walking away from your job of lately, I want to help you because I know you have a special gift and I know you can monetize it. And, kind of going back to what I said before, I think that people have so many unique attributes that they could share with the world, but they just don't know how. And I have an abundance of ideas. I'm not afraid to execute. My podcast, very similar. Like I said, I was using freeconferencecall.com before that. And then I would get in my head sometimes. I'd be like, oh, it's this person I'm interviewing going to think that I'm like less of a professional or less of a podcaster because I'm using this free service over Zoom. I had a client come into my home once and was pretty appalled that I don't work on a Mac. Because she's like, how are you a marketer without a Mac? I'm like, I don't know. I just, that's just so weird what people latch onto in their head and what they create for you in order for you to be successful. Like, no, I can do my job just fine on my PC. Thank you. But yeah, again, verbal diarrhea there. I don't really know where I was going with that, but I love the idea of transcribing the shows and repurposing it for a second book. I have been told by multiple people that I need to write a book, but I never follow up that question with, why are you saying that? What do you think I need to write a book on? Except for the other day, my mom was like, I was telling her this horrible morning that I had with my 2 children and they were really keeping me on my toes. And she told me I should write a book so that other people could feel better about themselves. I was like, thanks, Mom. But so writing the book. So, so you recorded it. Did you have a ghostwriter? Did you write every single word in your book yourself? Like, how did that come together?
I wrote my book. First, I spoke my book. I went to some training that I paid a bunch of money for and spoke my book. And then I read the transcript of it. They transcribed it for me and I read the transcript and I was horrified and I put it down because my writing is much better than transcribed speaking, and so I was like, I'm never going to use that. So it was a real personal journey. I mean, it was really hard for me to write my book, but I ultimately did hire a ghostwriter who I gave her all my stuff, like transcriptions from stuff. And, we worked together on the outline of it. The hardest part was the outline because there were so many different ways I could go. It's such a dense topic, emotional eating and food and all that. There's so many different ways to go. So we finally got it into a manageable system, and she did write from my stuff, so sort of a mixture of my words and her words, and then I edited it and kind of came back more to how I would say things, but I couldn't have done it without the help. I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have finished it if I hadn't reached out for help. So that was a big boon for me.
Yeah, it does seem like a very daunting task. Like, where do you even begin? That's where I'm at. Like, and just pick, like you said, nailing down a topic and not just trying to cram everything you want to tell people into one book.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I could easily do another one. I just don't feel like it because it's such a big job. I really just want to do my business. I love my business, and the book works. I mean, there's so much I can do with the book that I haven't done yet. So in terms of getting it out there and more marketing, it's been out for 4 years, but there's so much I can do with it to get it out there further. So I'd rather do that than go write another book personally.
Right. Talk to me a little bit about the PR opportunities that you've had. You've been on some major networks. How did that come about?
I hired a PR firm to help me.
Okay.
So I just hire out, I don't have time to do that stuff. You can totally do it on your own. It is not hard to get, if you learn how, it's not that hard to get, gigs now, especially that everybody's, recording from home now. I mean, COVID has made it so much more of a level playing field, but again, I hired out for it. I did it for about 6 months. I got some great spots, but I don't get clients from TV, so it's nice to say you've been on TV, but basically, it doesn't get you business. It just up levels. It just gives you street cred, basically.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm actually teaching my students right now about advertising appeals, and how advertising appeals to somebody on an emotional level or a logical level, or you can use a humor appeal and try to catch people that way. And yeah, so when you look at a site and you see those things, it's maybe it's comforting, or like you said, it gives you street cred. Oh, really good. Anything else about your entrepreneur journey that I don't know, maybe you don't talk about very often, or a funny story, or words of wisdom that were passed on to you that you can pass on to our listeners?
I think what comes to mind for me is kind of a funny, well, it might not sound so funny when I say it, but it's, um, what I tell my clients, around their healing journey. And it's what was told to me from my mentor is just sort of a way of staying balanced around things, because to me, the emotional journey is the hardest. So what my mentor told me is you're never doing, and I apply it to business as well, is you're never doing as bad as you think you're doing, because we tend to beat ourselves up. So you're never doing as bad as you think you're doing, and you're never doing as good as you think you're doing.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like both, and I think that's kind of good to stay right size, because getting, emotionally off balance is a trap for us in either direction.
So super true. And it just helps keep you humble. I think that kind of mantra.
Yeah.
And it's always good to be humble when you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about, if somebody's listening right now, how do they identify themselves as needing help in the area of emotional eating? Yeah.
Well, sure. I mean, what I would say is take the quiz. So I've created a personal quiz for somebody, and this might be helpful for somebody just wondering about quizzes too. So my quiz is on my website, healyourhunger.com, and it's an emotional eating quiz, and it'll tell somebody, literally, they'll give them a personalized score. So it's like a 3-minute free quiz, which asks a bunch of questions about your behaviors around food and your mindset. And you'll learn by the end of the quiz whether you're an emotional eater or a food addict or somewhere in between. And so that's really what the quiz is meant for. And on the business side, the quiz is good because it's a good first step for people, which doesn't commit them to much, and it's free and it gives them information. And then from there, I can send them emails, that might be helpful for things that I'm offering, so people can learn how to, improve their situation.
That's great. And it kind of, okay, totally off subject here, but this is something I have not asked a guest in a really long time. You haven't happened to take the Enneagram, have you?
Oh my God, I was just thinking about that in my meditation this morning, literally.
See?
Yeah. So I have taken it. I've taken it, and then I wasn't sure about my score. My sister's really into the Enneagram. She's a therapist, so she's always like, "Oh yeah, he's a 7. Oh, she's a 10," and always telling me these things. And so I'm not very knowledgeable about it. So she thinks I'm a 7 on the Enneagram.
The enthusiast.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So
I buy that. Yeah.
But yeah. So no, I'm not too knowledgeable about that stuff.
I'm not either, but I did take it, and I do find it to be probably one of the most accurate personality quizzes that I've ever taken. So if she says you're a 7, you probably are a 7. I'm a 2, which is the helper. And then my second highest score is a tie between a 4 and a 6, which is the individualist and the loyalist. So, but yeah, anytime somebody says quiz, that's where my mind goes, because I found it to be such a fascinating tool.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah. Okay. So you have healyourhunger.com. You have the Heal Your Hunger podcast. I'm assuming your social media handles are branded similarly, Heal Your Hunger. Instagram. Yeah. Where else are you?
Instagram's actually Tricia Nelson _ at the end of the N and Nelson. So Tricia Nelson underscore is my
Okay.
more active Instagram.
Okay. Great. I'll link that for everybody in the episode notes as well. Any final words of advice that you want to share with our listeners today?
No, just keep the faith and put one foot in front of the other and meditate.
I love it. It's that easy. I always put I always put a little like meditation. I make like slides, kind of like a presentation,
Mhm.
and I loop it as my students are coming into class to sit down because students are just super stressed out these days.
Mm.
And so yeah, I use my meditation tools and my yoga, and I put on some super zen music, and it's funny because they're really unsure about it at first, but then, the other day someone's like, Miss Miller, do you meditate every day? And I'm like, if I'm being honest, no, I don't,
Yeah.
but you got to start somewhere, right? And
Yes.
I agree. I think um, the book that changed my life, I think changed my way of thinking just around so many things, is The Four Agreements by
Yeah.
Don Miguel Ruiz. Have you read that?
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah, such a great book. But yeah, so kind of jumping from subject to subject there, but that just bounced into my mind. But I agree. I think if we meditate, if we read that book, it could
Hmm.
be super helpful for the
Very
whole
much
world
so.
right now. That's definitely what they need to hear. Take time to meditate and keep the faith. What a strong, powerful message.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's an inside job. It takes
Mm,
it's not for the faint of heart, and it is a journey. It's that cliche, it's a marathon, not a sprint, is just all too true. So it's just really important to pace yourself and make sure you're supported.
yeah, that's a perfect description, an inside job. I love that. I'm so carrying that with me. Thank
Mm,
you. Thank you for that.
yeah.
Well, Tricia, it was great to connect with you today. And thank you for sharing just about your entrepreneurial journey, your personal journey with emotional eating, all the tools that you shared today, the quiz, the website, the podcast. I'll link all that in the episode notes so people can connect with you. And again, I just appreciate you for sharing with the world and getting out there and doing the thing.
Thank you. Thanks for your wonderful work and all the guidance you're giving to young entrepreneurs. It's awesome.
Oh, thanks for recognizing that. I appreciate you.
Yeah, you too, sweetie. Thank you.